Welcome to Seniorship, conversations about getting the most out of later life. My name's Michael MacMahon. My guest today is Ron Stagg. He is a friend of a friend. I have met him before, but it was many, many years ago. Ron and I had some connections apart from the mutual friend, namely he is a Bristolian and I lived in Bristol for 20 very, very happy years until recently. So I was looking forward to this conversation. In particular, something I learned about Ron is that he had a totally life-changing event at about the age of 70 and decided to take a gap year. I thought that was a terrific thing to do. And the things he did amazed me because he went travelling, and I enjoy travelling to a certain extent, but the travelling that he did in his gap year put me to shame. Hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Seniorship, the podcast where we talk to people who are either contemplating retirement or are already retired about how to get the best out of later life, in their opinion, because this is what we want to find out about from people who are in that situation. Our guest today is Ron Stagg, whom I've met a couple of times several years ago. And here's a couple of things that I remember about Ron is, well, first of all, a successful businessman. Secondly, an eminent Rotarian, and I think you may still well still be a Rotarian, Ron. And thirdly, a very long-standing friend of Tim Arnold, who is the chair of our team here at Seniorship. So, Ron, welcome to Seniorship. And let me fire at you first of all the question that I like quite often to start with. How do you describe yourself now? Would you say you're retired, you're semi-retired, or something else?
I suppose really it may be something else, but or semi-retired. I still have a business which my son largely runs, but I get involved in on a regular basis. Well, at least once a week, I go into the office and look at the overall sort of future planning and making sure the financial side of it is to my liking.
Yeah.
So that's what I do there as far as business is concerned. And then the other things that I do are really the important things like health and family and friends. So I suppose semi-retired is a good way of describing it.
Good. Very good, very good. Now, I mentioned when I met you before, I remember Tim and I were speaking at one of your district conferences of Rotary. And are you still a Rotarian these days?
No, I'm no longer a Rotarian. You know, these things happen sometimes where you get an aging club who perhaps don't do the sorts of things that I still think that Rotarians should be doing. But I do keep a very active sort of eye, if that's the right word, on Nepal, where I visited several times, and where I still have a number of good friends.
Yes, and I think in that connection, as I mentioned before, this is one of the ways in which I met you. So you said friends, family, etc., etc. Apart from that, what is important to you at this stage in your life?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is making sure that, I mean, first of all, age, as we always say, is a number. So I don't think of myself as being old. I think that my body's letting me down a bit at times, but otherwise, I try and do as much as possible. I walk regularly, so I think health is very important. I think family is also very, very important, and keeping up those contact, or more than contacts, but keeping the family together, and also friends. I think that one needs to keep talking to people, and therefore your brain is still alive, particularly in discussions where you don't agree with the other person, particularly. But the end result is that you are still very good friends, basically.
Oh, I like that. When you said, especially, and even when you don't agree with the other person, that's very good. Reminds me of a great line from The West Wing, which a kind of political sitcom I
Yep.
used to love. And
Yes.
somebody speaking of the fictional president said he likes to talking to smart people who disagree with him.
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely, isn't it? It gets the brain cells working away there. So yeah, I think so that I enjoy, and I said I've we have there's about 14 or 15 of us lads, as we call ourselves, that
Yes.
meet up at least once a month on a for lunchtime, which tends to sort of spill over a little bit into the afternoon and later sometimes, and that's I think very important. And part of that same group, but extending to others, is that we have a supper club, which my wife and I very much enjoy, where we have about a dozen couples who meet up again once a month on a more social basis. But yeah, it's still doing the things besides looking at holidays, uh, all those other things that are built up a part of life.
And you mentioned family, Ron. So family means for you what? Who's involved there?
Right, I have two sons. I have my eldest Nick is in Birmingham,
You mentioned, yeah.
and is been with his partner now for about 14 years. He hasn't got children of his own, but she has. And then my youngest is Tim. He's and he runs up and over doors for me, but also does a number of other entrepreneuring type things, sort of following dad in that way. And then my first wife passed away about 11 years ago,
Okay, I'm
and
sorry.
I met up with Jan, interestingly, through Rotary about 8 or 9 years ago. And so we've been married now for about 7 years or so. And she has two children as well. So they are, again, part of the family. Uh, Tim has got three girls, and from sort of 13 down to about 8.
Yes,
So again, that is all part of the extended family.
sure. Absolutely. And by the way, I forgot to mention, so your younger son basically is the one who runs the business for you now, and
Yeah.
you're obviously quite involved. I forgot to mention a very important thing that you and Tim are both Bristolians, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I met Tim at the age of 11
Yes.
when on our first day of school, senior school. I've remained more of a Bristolian to my heart than Tim, who obviously, moved off into the wildness of being near London,
Yes.
which obviously affected him deeply. But I still forgive him for that.
You're saying in a good way or a bad way? No
Oh no,
comment.
obviously in a good way. Tim can only be seen in a good way. So yes, so we've kept in touch during that time, and at various times during our businesses, he has helped me as far as things like marketing, etc., are concerned, particularly on a business I was involved in earlier on. And I've hopefully have been a shoulder occasionally when he's needed a shoulder to lean on. But yeah, so we don't meet up as regularly as I think both of us would like, but when we do and when we talk, there's no awkward silences. We are immediately picking up from where we were before. So we go
Oh,
back a long way.
that sounds terrific, Ron, because I firmly believe that keeping in touch with people who've known you for a long time is quite important, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It is. I've got, probably, yeah, 4 or 5 people that are no longer sort of in Bristol and quite a long way away. So therefore, I do make sure that we have regular emails at the very least, if not sort of talks. So within my family, I've also got two brothers as well,
Yes.
um, who we keep in touch with regularly. Len, my eldest, is in Lincoln, so he's a bit of a distance away. But Bob, my youngest, is not far away. So yeah, so we keep in touch.
Okay. Okay. Well, we talked about, whether one sees oneself as retired or semi-retired or whatever else it is. For myself, when people asked me the question years ago, I used to say, well, no, I'm not really a fan of retiring because I don't play golf. Do you play golf,
Yeah.
Ron?
No, I only I've tried several times, and particularly when in business, I was obviously had plenty of opportunities to go
Yeah,
on
yeah,
sort of
sure.
sort of sponsored days. But the damn thing, if I did one shot and I would hit it sort of 200 yards in a straight line, and the next four would go over my shoulder. So that was very frustrating, and I don't like being frustrated in that way. So no, I never was one for golf, and I think a bit late to start thinking about it now.
Okay, but is there, well, you and I both in the golf department, is there anything you've taken up since you became, quotes, semi-retired that you didn't do much of before?
No, not really. I think we, Jan and I have gone on more sort of holidays since then. But I mean, I've had a couple of fairly sort of nasty health blips, so that's taken up a
Yeah.
bit of time as well. But I've not felt the need to take up anything extra. I think the main thing to do is to not do anything you don't want to do, so that you actually do what you want to do. And so if somebody says to you, you really ought to go and join this group, no. I mean, we thought about dancing, we thought about Tai Chi, and who knows, that might happen. But it's not an essential.
Good. Ron, I must say, I like that very much. The do what you want to do, and I suppose as you get older, you develop um, good ways of saying no, I don't want to. Um,
Yeah, I
the
think you just
right
say no.
way,
Thank you.
or I'm just too busy.
Yeah, whichever. But yes, yeah. Um, it's nice to if people sort of ask you to do things or to get involved, but you no.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Ron, you said you've had a couple of health scares recently, but hopefully things are looking good health-wise at the moment. You're looking in good shape, I must say.
Well, I've had two lots of cancer, which I've got through, but I've got a sort of some investigations at the moment, which I hope are going to be positive. Yeah, um,
Yeah.
but I think the thing is that one important thing is it retirement. Let's say people begin to think of retirement in their early 60s, some go into early 70s, whatever. But I think if there's things you want to do in, let's say, travel particularly, then I think you need to start looking at it in the 70s rather than wait to your 80s.
Yes.
I had, after my wife passed away, I had basically a gap year, which I'd never had before,
Yes.
probably because, like Tim, I'd never gone to university except the University of Life.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
in that year, my two sons took me off to Hong Kong, but then I did sort of 3 weeks in Turkey. I did 4 weeks in China, a few weeks in Nepal, and then I did probably the best part of 4 weeks in South America.
Wow.
And all of those things involved, involved a fair amount of being fit, and that was fine. Um, Interestingly, the two my I went to India to Amritsar with my two boys 18 months ago, and yeah, I was up with it, but I obviously wasn't up with them all the time. So I made
Yeah.
sure I ducked out and found the nearest cool place that served nice beer. So yeah. So
So
that's
you,
the thing. Don't think that you're going to go on forever in the same sort of the same
pace.
health wise as you are. So things you want to do that involve traveling or a bit more being healthy, you ought to be looking to do earlier rather than later.
But I love the idea that you did a gap year at the age of
Yeah, 70. Yeah,
70. I think
yeah.
that's fantastic. I think it's
Yeah.
fantastic. I think that's a brand of phrase we should promote more, Ron, actually. That's a very good point at which we're going to take a short break here. Don't go
Fine.
away. We will be back in
I
a
will stay
minute.
where I am.
And we're back with Ron Stagg, who's just been telling us about his gap year at the age of 70. And Ron, I did some traveling a couple of years ago, doing something that I had never done before, doing interrail trip, a couple of interrail
Okay.
trips
Yeah.
around Europe. But yours was far more ambitious, I must say, and obviously to some extent involves your sons too, even better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, two long hauls were with my sons, but one was was recently while I was, in my beginning, my 80s, with them on that one. But my first wife didn't like the idea of places that were not, sort of necessarily thought of as being the most clean
Yeah, yeah.
or
Okay.
maybe slightly dangerous, whatever. Whereas, I'd already been to Nepal once and I absolutely fell in love with it and the
Yes.
people. Um, Turkey, I always wanted to see Turkey, and had, incredible time there. It was I went with a tour group rather than do it all myself.
Okay.
But that worked out well because there are only 12 of us on that. And then China was again an eye opener. You can't do China unless you are in a tour party, really. Um, but again, there were probably 16 of us, and of those 16, about six of us sort of stuck together. But we had a very, very, very good, extensive tour. I thoroughly enjoyed it, every minute of it. It was wonderful, including I spent the last week on my own, um, before I went to Nepal, in the west of China, Midwest, where suddenly from the rails you were talking about, the express trains that China have,
Oh, the bullet train
where
type thing, yeah.
yeah, I mean, going on one from Shanghai, 320 miles an hour in 4 minutes, and you could put a glass of water down next to you and didn't move at all. Um, Going to the west, you were then back into a peasant area, and life was far more as people may imagine China is. So yeah, fantastic.
And did you find when you came back, and for example, having experienced China, the varieties of life in China, um,
Yeah.
uh, did you find it changed your view of life here in Britain and your life, having seen those things?
I think it makes you more tolerant, and you just confirm that people are people, and I met with nothing but with, I think, kindness, but certainly with friendship. When talks of places like Argentina, where the history of problems regarding the Falklands, again, nobody mentioned that in any negative way, and they were just very positive. They want to know how we lived, and so yeah, it was super, and so that I think is the same. And I was fortunate enough in business to do a fair amount of traveling anyway. So India, um, most of Europe, certainly the USA, and again, I've never found a major problem. But I was just saying that, I mean, for instance, in the States, I did make sure that I went in LA, for instance, say the sort of areas like Watts,
Yes.
driving around, making sure I could get away if need be. But again, you're looking at actually what life is like for a tremendous amount of people. So that's why at the moment, what's happening in the Middle East, particularly in Ukraine, is so sad, because we're talking in the main of ordinary people trying to live their lives, and somebody decides that isn't going to be the case. So yeah, I've always been an international sort of person, and I think the trips I did just reinforce that.
you sound like, well, certainly a very international person and a very sociable person too.
Yeah, I think that's important as well. I think that to if you go anywhere and you don't see anything and don't do anything and sit in the corner, then why are you going? So I think the important thing is to engage with where you are and the people you're there. Try not to annoy them too much, but yeah. Uh, but yeah, so yeah, it's. I mean, we've Jan and I have done some nice sort of European trips. We went over from Plymouth to Santander and then drove up the western coast of France. Again, super. That was when I was still in Rotary, and so we were in Bordeaux and had some wonderful hospitality from the people there. So yeah, it's you've just. I think you're just going to get that buzz of being somewhere. I'm fortunate. I live on the harbour now in Bristol,
Sorry, say
so
again.
I live on the harbour in Bristol now,
Okay.
in an apartment, and so we can immediately be out and mingling with people that are, anything from the age of 9 to 90.
Yes.
Uh, we hear different accents all the time, or different even languages being
Yes.
spoken, and I
Yes.
think that keeps one alive as well. Um, Whereas where I lived before, very nice, obviously, area of Bristol, but fairly conservative in both large sea and small sea. So yeah. So
Okay.
anyway, yeah,
Okay. Well, I lived in Bristol for 20 years, Ron, and I loved the place.
yeah,
And I would say I moved to Birmingham a couple of years ago, but until then, I would say Bristol's the best place I'd ever lived. And that
yeah.
harbour area that you describe is absolutely buzzing now, isn't it, really?
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
totally.
Ron,
And, yeah. Sorry, go
can
on.
I try something out on you? There
Yeah,
was a big study, when, it's a slow news day, when a newspaper article
yeah,
begins, studies have shown. But
yeah,
this
yeah,
one,
yeah. Sure. Yeah,
exactly, it was quite interesting. It was a long-term study, and I think it was done by somebody at Stanford University in the States, who had something
mm,
they wanted to do. Um, and the idea was to find out whether people in their 70s, even 80s, were still happy or less happy than they'd been before, uh, what their perception of their life was like. And what came out of it was, and they run this study with large numbers of people, many thousands of people, and based purely on people's perception of their own lives. And they did it for thousands of people over maybe 20 years time, a 20-year period. And what they came up with was a finding um, that people actually in the age group we're talking about here, 70s and 80s in particular, and 60s too, were actually happier than most people in their 50s, 40s, 30s. Now,
mm.
if you read that somewhere, would that surprise you based on your experience,
No,
Ron?
no, not at all. I think the problem. Well, I say the problem is it not the problem. I'm a very fortunate situation in that my business career has meant that I'm financially sound. I
Yes.
think when that takes away a lot of pressure. Um, but I'm able to do most things that I want to do. I'm not held back by anything. But I think that if I again was not particularly financially sound, I still think that I could get on a bus and go, wherever I want to. I probably got on a bus all around the UK, on a free bus pass. But
Yes.
yeah. So I think that it's a positive situation. There are a lot of negatives and strains and stresses in the 40s and 50s, where you are juggling, you know, children growing up and all that means as far as schools, um, you know, building a business or a career. And so I think at this age, I've not got any career to build. I'm not anticipating having doing a Charlie Chaplin and having any more children. So that's another sort of worry out the way. So yeah, I certainly feel happy now. And I think the thing is with even with when sort of health problems come knocking on the door, again, you want to be positive about these things as well, and just think to yourself, fine, let's listen to the main, people, the professionals, do what they say, and that is, and being positive yourself is going to help you get over it as well.
That sounds like a good attitude, Ron. And you've confirmed what I live in a retirement village. I never thought I would, but I do. And now I just found
Yeah.
out by mistake, really. Live in a retirement village. And somebody here told me about something called the blue zones theory, which is well, not theory.
Oh yeah.
You've
Yes.
heard about it, perhaps.
Yes,
And
I have. Yeah. Yeah.
apparently, again, the studies have shown massive, massive multifactorial studies showed that the number one predictor of long life and healthy life was even above diet, above exercise, above smoking, above alcohol, it was social contact. And from what you're
Yes. Yeah.
describing to me,
Yeah.
there's no surprise there.
Yeah. No, I'm not. I think that I think it's important to keep your mind active, to talk to friends and also people you don't know very well, particularly if you're in a situation where you're introduced to them, and that just keeps your mind there alive. It gives you different perspective. So yeah, we now know we're on limited time. We've got less time in front of us than we have behind us, but
Are you sure
we
about
can still enjoy it.
that?
Yeah, we can still enjoy it. So yeah, I think overall, I'm happy with the life that I've had and the life I've got now. Um, and could people say, well, what would you change if you went back? And you think, well, if you went back and changed one thing, then the whole world that you're involved in would be totally disappear anyway. So no, I'm happy where I am now.
Good. Well, with that in mind, uh, how about describing to me an ideal day for you, Ron?
Oh, that's a difficult one, really, because I have different types of days. So I enjoy going into the office and seeing my son, getting a buzz of the office and the people that are there. But I'm also very happy to go out with Jan and for us to go to the local garden centre. Although we got two balconies but no garden, local garden centre, and just immerse ourselves in the beauty of those and have a nice healthy lunch there. So each one's different. I look forward tomorrow. I've got my lad's lunch tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to that. But I don't have a set day really.
Okay.
So virtually every day that I have, I enjoy doing something of it, if not all of it. Even if occasionally, and it's very occasionally, I have what's called a slob day when I don't do anything. I perhaps just wander around the harbour with Jan, and we have a cup of coffee somewhere, and that's it. I don't have any enormous thoughts, no great creations. So yeah. I
I
don't
think,
have that ideal day, but I
okay.
enjoy the days I have.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, that sounds good. And you mentioned a slob day or yeah, kind of a,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. My dad had a similar phrase. He used to call it slummocking is what he used to call it. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. That's
what?
a good word. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think slummocking it sums it up. I think yeah. Um, but yeah, it's just a day of literally doing nothing. If you want to stay in bed, I mean, I don't think I've ever done this, but I mean, if you feel you want to stay in bed for a day, we're at the age now where we can. Well, if it doesn't harm anybody, then fine. But yeah, I don't think you need to get every minute in every day to be really doing something. You know, uh, if you can just relax occasionally, fine.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah.
And you talking about your Bristolian roots, my Tim told me to ask you something about the an advert he saw at the Bristol Stadium. Is that what used to be called the Mem?
Yes, it is. Yes, yeah, where it was stolen by from the people of Bristol by somebody who then gave it to Bristol Rovers for a penny. I think it was a new penny, so at least that was one thing. But yes, the mem. Tim lived probably about a quarter of an hour away from it. I lived about 5 minutes away from the mem, so the mem was a very important part of my life. So yes, the advert there for Brunel. Yeah, we did some adverts, but that's some time ago when that was happening. I mean, it's incredible to think that I actually saw Brunel 18 years ago. So long time.
Yes, and what? So you mentioned Up and Over Doors, which is the business your
Yes.
son runs now. So
Yeah.
what did
Yeah.
Brunel do, Ron?
So Brunel were consumer healthcare in the end. So it was basically a private label in vitamins and supplements. We did about 65-70% of Boots business, for instance sake, or maybe other multiples, and also basic analgesics, so things like paracetamol and aspirin.
Okay.
I'm going to say the company is still going. It's now based in Swadlincote in near Derby,
Okay.
and it's still Brunel, and it's now Brunel Healthcare Manufacturing. I think it's been sold a few more times since, but the name's still there, which
Good.
is nice.
Good, 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 good. Well, I know that Tim, when he saw the advert on some TV program, thought, there's a Ron Stagg connection there, I'm sure. And so he'll be pleased to know he
Yeah.
was right. He was right. Listen,
Yes.
Ron,
Yep.
I think in many ways you've turned out to be quite a template, really, for retire. Now, by the way, you mentioned to me before something about being 70 and about being 80. I have the impression, if you've known Tim since you were the same age as Tim, that makes you about 81, I would guess, something like that.
Absolutely spot on. 82 in August. I'm a youngster compared to Tim because his birthday's in April. So he's going to be 82 3 months or so before me. Yeah.
Yes. Excellent. Ron Stagg, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. And thank you for listening or watching this Seniorship podcast. And please subscribe and do all the sort of things you're supposed to find other content. And our thanks to Ron Stagg. Bye bye for now,
Okay.
Ron.
If I can just say one thing, Michael, and that is that I actually love Krug champagne, which I think is absolutely marvelous, and I also love Buckham beer,
Oh.
and I actually love that. So just in case anybody from either of those two companies are looking on, want me to be, a sponsor for them, I'm here.
Always like to
Michael,
end on a
very very
positive
nice.
note, and that was a very positive one. Bye bye for now. And
All
we're
right, very
out.
nice to speak to you, Michael.
And we're out. I
Thank you.
always
Bye.
like saying that.